with that charter school that your girls go to, what has your experiences been? Good, bad, in the middle? What are some examples you've had of them?
I think for the most part, it's been good. We kind of like with the waiver program you were speaking about, we had the ability during COVID to not adhere to all of the things that the public schools were having to do based on like the vaccinations and the testing and the going to school and the quarantining and all of that. We had kind of a voluntary pick your poison, and if you don't want to, you can just go to school, and there was no accountability that was being had on our part. So we had the ability to kind of mold it ourselves in our own school, which was nice. So that was my first experience, and that was really good. We had some high school teachers that have been questionable, though. Just the way that they dress, some of the things that they've done that are very obvious. I don't care if a teacher's gay. I don't care if a teacher has different political views than me, obviously. But what I do care about is when they're pushed on the kids. And then this actually happened to my youngest, her first year. She was wearing the good old Trump 2020 hat, and a teacher caught her in the hall and looked at the hat and smiled and said, you could get shot for wearing a hat like that.
How old was your child?
Yeah, she was in 5th grade.
Oh my gosh.
So it's just...
This is the same child that, was crying because she got ridiculed for not knowing about the COVID stuff. Like,
I know.
Poor child.
I know. And she's unaware of the controversy, I guess, surrounding the name Trump with a lot of the people, that don't see eye to eye on him. There's just, he gets people fired up. And so I think that the teacher just didn't realize he was incredibly out of line. And the good news is he had a couple of other parents that were onto him. He was gay and talked about it to the young children. He was a 2nd grade teacher. Yeah. So he had a lot of dings against him already. I think ours was the last straw. And so his contract was not renewed. So luckily we really never had to see him again after that incident. So I do thank the school for doing that. However, there's still a lot of things going on that I don't agree with. That like we've got a lot of gay pride flags and not a lot of patriotic things going on. So I'm kind of concerned with that. I just don't think it's good for a school to have those things. That's an ideology. That's not something they're teaching.
Well, and it definitely takes away from the matter at hand because we're spending more time talking about being inclusive and being supportive of the gay community and not being supportive of our children who are struggling to read,
Right.
Kind of that hand in hand.
Yeah, exactly. I don't think that a lot of the classes that they teach to kind of draw the line with the basics. I think that there's a lot of fluff classes that are going on that we really don't need to be there. I've even told her that, I kind of don't care if you don't excel in this class really, because it's not something that you're going to need in the real world. Pass it, let's get through it, but don't worry about it. We don't need to worry about, what was it? Like interpersonal relations and how something self-esteem wise or something like that. And like, that's our job as parents. I don't think I ever had that class.
No.
And I can't say I'm like missing it at this point.
No.
So.
Well, but see, that's the thing too, is that in order for them to try and groom the children, right? Like we talked about, not necessarily sexually, but if you teach them how to treat people, it's a very fine, blurry line between, is it the family's responsibility to teach a child how to interact, or is it the school's responsibility? And, I do agree to some extent, but where I disagree the most and where I think is the biggest problem is so they're teaching the kids this class, right? Like interpersonal relationships and self-esteem, okay? But yet you may have, and I don't know if this is happening at the charter, but I can say it's most definitely happening at the public schools. You can have a child throwing chairs, having a major meltdown. The entire class has to stop to focus on this child, but nothing can happen to this child. There's no real repercussions for this. That's taking away from everything that they're trying to teach. Mm-hmm. And it's also showing the other kids that, hey, if I don't want to work on this assignment, I can just throw a chair. Nothing's going to happen to me.
Yeah, and that's another frustrating thing I have ran into. I don't know a lot of the other incidences that have gone on, but I do know that my youngest, who's in 6th grade now, she's had some incidences with bullying, fighting. It's more of her standing up for other kiddos.
She's a little firecracker.
She is. She's a firecracker.
I can definitely see her being a protector and taking that upon herself.
And I think instead of seeing that as a kind of a positive, and maybe reprimanding the kids that she's, pinpointing for a reason, it's not like they're angels. They're only coming down hard on her because she ends up being the one that like throws the first punch or shoves him to the ground or whatever it may be. Whereas they're not looking at what's actually going on, which is that little boy called her, the S word or the W word or something like that. That's not called for. And it gets to the point where
I'm sorry, if my kid got called that, I would be the one pushing him to the ground.
Yeah, exactly. And that was the first incident. Was she was called those names for no reason. She was 11 at the time. So she was just standing up for herself, and I absolutely 100% did not discipline her at home, and I didn't agree with the discipline happening at school because all she's doing is defending herself. Now, there's fighting that goes on at school that isn't that, but I don't think they look into the core problem of like we have kids that are just being a-holes to each other and there's no repercussions.
Well, we know typically when somebody's acting out like that against someone, unless like you've done something blatant, right, to the child, like stole their basketball or stole something from them or, something like that. When a child is calling another child those words, those names, they're learning it from somewhere. And so instead of looking at what led to this, why did this child do this, they are more focused on, well, why did you respond that way?
Right.
And I think that's also a very scary path that we're headed down. And I think we see it with social media and adults. We have all these keyboard warriors that forgot what it's like to get punched in the face when they say something crazy to somebody else. And I've noticed it with students, been called a Karen by a student because I didn't think that them speeding through the parking lot was safe. I would never talk to an adult that way.
Right.
And my child would never talk to an adult that way. It'd be, yes, ma'am. Yes, sir. No, sir. I'm sorry, sir. Please.
Yes.
That's where we have this, we go back to that conversation of who is responsible, the family or the schools, because the schools aren't making the families be accountable for their children's actions.
Right.
And so then the school sees that as an opportunity for them to step in. But instead of, because they can't make the kid who called your daughter these names be, they can't necessarily force him, then they go after her because of her actions. And that's something that they can, have a little bit more control over. But that's not fair punishment.
No. And then what are you teaching the kids? We're holding this child that's been blatantly disrespectful to another child, the victim. And that's not the case in the real world. But that's how, look at this generation coming into adulthood. That's how they treat each other.
Yep.
And it is really disrespectful. And we're not, I almost want to say bring back bullying because we had that accountability towards each other. We had each other's backs as far as, sticking.
Well, and I think when you had bullying, right, you weren't as bold to say something wild to somebody without having the facts or, having a good reason to say it, because you didn't want somebody else to come back and get back at you, this is allowing kids to freely go around doing whatever they want to whomever they want and not really having any repercussions. Because even if she hadn't responded to them and threw the first punch and shoved him to the ground, which, by the way, go girl, get it, what would have been the true ramifications for that child? Probably nothing.
Nothing. Yep, exactly.
I think what it is that they don't want the kids to be empowered. They don't want the kids to stand up for themselves because they're easier to control. They're easier to manipulate.
True. Yep, good point.
And, we know that the government is fully involved in our educational system, and the government wants to control us.
Right.
I'll get my tinfoil hat out right now, no problem, because that's really the truth. They want us to be reliant on them, and they want us to do what they say. Look at the COVID lockdowns. Look at the COVID vaccine.
All the things they're pushing.
And if we can integrate that now in children at a young age and tell them, don't stand up for yourself, that's going to make the better manipulated adult later on down the road.
So much easier. Yeah, exactly. But not to be so negative on the charter school that they are in. I do think that there's a lot of positives that the charter school they go to now has benefited us on. We have a lot of options as far as electives. They're very good at listening to parents and kind of bringing things to fruition of their ideas of what their kids should be doing. And the benefit of going to the local community college and having them pay for that, that's really beneficial. I've also enjoyed kind of the community feel that this school brings since they have elementary, middle school, and high school. It's kind of like a big family. We all know each other pretty well, considering you don't know anybody when you're in the public schools most of the time. I even didn't when I went there. But I think it's helped with the girls feeling comfortable and knowing who to go to when they need help or making friends or allowing me to, be there as a very active parent and helping them, either with their schoolwork or meeting with administrators to sort things out. I think they're very open to parent involvement versus a lot of the public schools. I didn't feel that wall that was put up once I left go up. So
I definitely would agree that it does seem like, and maybe it's just the way your guys' board of governors is set up or whatever, but from some of the experiences, obviously as an outsider that I've seen, it does seem like you guys can take something to them and it is considered. It's not something that is brushed under the rug until you get a big enough commotion to go about it. They're typically like, oh, hey, we need to address this kind of a thing. And I definitely can see that would be really nice. I know at my son's school, they had started a program. It's called Frenzy. And it's kind of their take on social emotional learning. Within a week of that coming out, they held a conversation between the parents and the administration to discuss, yes, we understand how this kind of looks like social emotional learning. This is how we're actually doing it. This is what our approach is.
Okay.
And this is because there are some benefits to social emotional learning. It's good to talk about hey, when you give someone a compliment, that makes you feel good and that makes them feel good. And when you give someone a cut down, that makes you feel like crap because typically you don't feel good off of that. And it makes them feel like crap. Those conversations are great.
Yeah.
Yes. And so it was nice to see just that quick response of, we hear you and we want to talk about this now. Yes. Whereas I feel like, in District 6, that's not the case. We brought up the fact that there are the RFID tracking chips inside the student IDs. Oh gosh, it took 7 months, I think, before the district finally came out. And I would, go up there and say, if there's nothing nefarious going on, why are you not talking to us about it? And so that is something I definitely admire when I look at this school. And wish that, the public school would embody a little bit more. I feel like they're more interested in isolating. The superintendent and the school board president will meet with you and try to talk about it quietly, but don't make a big deal about it, okay? And they want to hurry up and take care of it instead of saying, hey, let's talk about this as a group.
Right.
Let's figure out how we can work around this and clear this up. Because when you have those isolated conversations, when the next parent encounters it or comes across it, then you're going to have to do that again.
Yeah. I wish they would be more open to us. And I just feel like District 6 is so big. I don't know if they have a full grasp of all of the concerns parents have, and when the parents aren't being listened to and when they are so out of touch with what the parents and the students need from the district, there's such a disconnect that nothing gets done. And I think that's what's happening right now. It's just they're too big and we have so many issues that aren't being heard. They just have gotten to the point where they ignore us.
Yeah, I agree. Unless it's something big that's flooding Facebook or
social news,
flooding social media all over the place. Yeah. Then they're like, oh, okay, I guess we have to address this.
Exactly.
Instead of addressing it at first or, when it first comes out. All right. That does it for this episode. Thank you so much for joining me today, Bobbi.
Thank you for having me.
I hope you come back on. For all of my university friends and family that are listening, Bobbi is running for Board of Governors for university, and so please support her and help her get on the board there.
Thank you. Yes, voting starts on, I believe, April 15th, and then it will run until the end of the month, and then they'll ratify the ballots on May 1st. So thank you for your support.
Awesome. Good luck to you, Bobbi.
Thank you.
Thank you guys so much for joining me today. Bye.